Hello and welcome to my video, my impressions video of Eliminator on the Commodore 64 DTV plug and play. Of all the games that are on the actual DTV device, I would say that this was probably one of the more impressive. Certainly technically, it's one of the most impressive on there. It reminds me in a lot of ways of a game that, if I remember correctly, was called Ball Blazer, and that used this sort of similar type of racing into the screen type design. I can't really say this is 3D because in the modern sense of the word, and I don't mean 3D as in stereoscopic 3D, I mean 3D as in 3D graphics. In the modern sense of the word, it really isn't. However, it is, for its day, was probably as damn as good as you were going to get for 3D. It kind of, to me, I get the feeling when I'm playing the game that it was really pushing the Commodore 64 to its absolute limits. Certainly the controls aren't as responsive as what I would have hoped it would be. It's difficult to try to describe what this game actually is. It's kind of like a shoot 'em up, but you're actually on a race track of some sort. It's like one of those sorts of hybrid type of games. You've got to avoid these obstacles and pick up power-ups. But it's difficult to know what's going to kill you and what isn't. Now, there's some of the barriers that you can see here. You can't destroy them. Well, certainly you can't destroy them with a basic weapon, and if you collide with them, you'll explode. But there are other things as well that litter the track, and at first I really didn't know whether you could pick these items up, whether they're items you can collect. I mean, here's the actual shoot 'em up element of the game. You got the bad guys coming down and shooting back at you. But again, it's the issue of not having the instruction manual. I was going to say control manual then. The instruction manual as to know what's good and what's bad. So I ended up playing the game for a while without actually picking up any power-ups, simply because I didn't really know whether I was supposed to pick them up. I tried shooting them and nothing was happening. But considering that one of the rules of the game had already been established, that things that you couldn't shoot could kill you, I ended up just dodging them out of the way. You see, part of the problem with Eliminator is that the controls aren't the most responsive in the world. It's quite sluggish moving your spaceship from left to right. And again, this is where I think it was really pushing the technological envelope of the Commodore 64. Because of the sluggish response of the controls, you almost have to think a couple of moves ahead of what you're going to do. So you can't really make last minute judgment calls, otherwise you just end up blowing up. And believe me, when I first started to play this game, I did a lot of blowing up. As you can see there. So once I actually discovered that you could pick things up, it seemed to open up the game a lot more, and I started to get more enjoyment out of it. As I say, I mean, I think the objective is you just simply have to get to the end of the course and blow up as many things as you can and dodge the obstacles that are littering the track. And it's a simple concept, and it is as well executed as I think you were ever likely to get. Now, these are some of the power-ups that I wasn't too sure what the hell was going on with them, so I just avoided them when I first started playing the game, which made life obviously a lot more difficult. But yeah, I think this was probably as technically as good as I was likely to get on the Commodore 64. It wasn't world renowned for its 3D graphics capabilities, or even its pseudo 3D graphics capabilities. it was very much something that handled sprites. And interestingly enough, when games in the late 80s, early 90s went into a bit of an experimental period where games like Driller, for example, used filled in 3D landscapes, which was essentially vector graphics landscapes, but the vector graphics were filled in. And on the likes of the ZX Spectrum, those games worked a lot better than they did on the Commodore 64. I remember a friend of mine had Driller, and I played it on his Spectrum. Really enjoyed it, rushed out, got it on the Commodore 64, and it was a lot slower. It just seemed to struggle handling those type of graphics. Now, whether that was just a poor conversion or not, I don't know, but that certainly put me off buying any similar games in the future. Essentially because when a game plays like that, like this does to some extent, it can severely impact the playability. And when you marry that to a controller that might not be perfectly suited to this type of game, which unfortunately the joystick that comes with the Commodore 64 DTV doesn't really feel ideally suited to these type of games, it makes life very difficult. And so maintaining a decent frame rate and maintaining a good response time is absolutely essential. And that's the one thing I think that really does let Eliminator down. You can get around it, you just have to try to think ahead. You really do have to look right at the very end of the track for as soon as something appears. You need to be able to know what you're going to do, and whether it's something you're going to dodge or whether it's something you're going to shoot at. So it's just having to replay it over and over again in order to get familiar with pickups, power-ups obstacles and alien bad guys. And even then it's difficult. I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's almost like the controls are very woolly in terms of that when you press in a particular direction it doesn't really snap to it. As you can see, the craft sort of moves at a very sedate pace, and so the slightest error in judgment, if you go left instead of going right, it's not the easiest thing to compensate and then fix. So you are constantly having to be on your guard and make sure that you're in the right place at the right time. I guess that was just par for the course for playing games like this. And the other bugbear that I have is when the aliens shoot at you, it's sometimes difficult to judge whether or not their bullets are going to hit you and kill you. And that is a problem. There were sometimes I thought that the bullet wasn't on the same square that I was when I got hit. And there are other times where it just really appeared that the bullet passed right through me. And this essentially is because of the way that the 3D is handled. Particularly when you're on a corner, the bullets, see like there, I would have said that bullet hit me, but the game itself doesn't register it that way, because it's almost like it's hard to describe. It's almost like it registers the trajectory that the bullet is going, and if you're on that trajectory it will blow you up, even if the bullet isn't technically, I don't know, I'm talking absolute garbage. It just doesn't feel like the bullet itself. When you do die sometimes, it doesn't feel that the bullet was actually destined to hit you. It just seems to change direction. I guess it follows the contour of the course rather than travels in a straight line. I guess that's probably the best way to describe it. So yeah, I'm on to the second stage on the course now, and got a nice weapon power up, and I sink to my death in what appears to be water or some form of blue liquid in the middle. will no doubt make it more of a challenge. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much Eliminator on the Commodore 64 DTV. Never played it before. I don't know if I'd bother playing it again. It is quite frustrating, to be honest with you. The controls are quite annoying. But it's well worth it. I mean, if you get the DTV, give it a shot anyway. I mean, why not? But I wouldn't actively go out and seek it. Just, if you've got... It just doesn't feel responsive enough. Technically, it's a great achievement, but playability-wise, I just found it frustrating. Anyway, that's it, and thanks for watching this video, and please stay tuned for more coming on my channel soon.